What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome to our draft analysis of our brand new draft league that we are a part of this season. We are part of season 3 of the UNPL Pokemon Draft League, and I couldn't be more excited. Now that the DLC has dropped, I think that it is about time that we join another league, and I was fortunate enough to receive an invitation to this one, so I am super excited about that. So what is Draft League? Draft League is a competitive Pokemon format similar to fantasy football, where players, what we call coaches, draft teams between 10 and 12 Pokemon, at least in this league, and we can use those Pokemon exclusively, meaning that only that coach has that Mon and nobody else can use it. Each Pokemon has a pre-assigned value between 1 and 20 points based on its viability, and we even banned certain Pokemon that are just a little bit too strong, such as Urshifu Single Strike, Fluttermane, and Magearna. We also chose to be somewhat unique. There are a lot of other draft leagues starting up right now, and each of them have a little bit of different takes on certain mons that were introduced in the DLC. We happened to allow Darkrai, and we also split up Ogerpon into 4 different forms depending on which mask it is wearing. You may see other leagues out there that do this differently. It's all new, so we have no clue what's going to be good. We'll just have to find out, and we can adjust next season. As far as terastallization is concerned, this league allows up to 3 Pokemon that we draft to terastallize, and we are doing a low tier Terra setup. The specifics of this one is that you have up to 18 Terra points, and of course each Mon has a value that is assigned to it, and so no one Pokemon can be more than 12 points, and you cannot have more than 18 points of Terra Pokemon. So you can have a 12 point Mon and a 6 point Mon, or you could split it up from there and have 3 as long as you don't exceed that 18 point total. Every Pokemon that can terastallize can choose amongst 3 different types. One of those must be one of its stab types or one of its same type attacks that it has already, and then the other 2 can be whatever you want. So for instance, if you took a Charizard, it could terastallize into either fire or flying as its first typing, and then you can do whatever you want with the other 2. You could include the other type that you didn't choose, but you don't have to. You can choose whatever you want for those other 2. We, of course, go in a snake draft format, so whoever is number 1 will go all the way down to, in our case, number 12, and then 12 will start again, and we go back up the list. We have 2 different divisions this time around, so if you are watching certain coaches from this division that I am in, the Uva Division, you may see some coaches in the Naranja Division that have some of the same Pokemon. We drafted from different pools, and so you'll see some overlap, but in separate divisions. You're not going to see me facing anyone in the Uva Division with any Pokemon in common with me. And same thing with Naranja, they will of course be exclusive amongst their division. We have a 9-week season this time around, so that means that we're going to face every coach except for 2 of them. It's all randomized, it's all determined already, so I already know my season so far. And of course then there will be playoffs based on everybody's individual standings, and possibly differential if there is a tie, meaning, you know, if you won by 4 Mons, right, you'd have a +4 differential. If you lost by 2, you'd have a -2. And then of course that is all added together at the end of the season. If there ends up being a tie, then that of course will be the tiebreaker. Then of course there is a few weeks of playoffs, and the finals will be the finalist from the Uva Division and the finalists from the Naranja Division, and they will face off against each other to see who is the ultimate champion. Hopefully that will be us, but we'll just see. We'll just have to see where we end up on this season. Now, before I talk about my team, I wanted to talk about my new team name and my new team logo. For any of you that kept up with me last season in the SSBA, I made my own logo, and it was sketchy at best because I am not talented in that regard. And so this season I wanted to do something a little bit better, seeing how this is more of a serious and premier league. I wanted to have something done. And so I wanted to show you all in classic Dapper fashion what that new awesome logo looks like. So check this out. you guys really like it. Of course, shout out to TX for doing this. He did an amazing job with mine. He's done several of the other coaches' logos going into this league, and so he does fantastic stuff. His Twitter's in the description. Make sure to check him out, and if you need any kind of art stuff, see if he is taking commissions, and I'm sure he would be happy to help you out with that. Really awesome stuff. And also, that video presentation was made by the one and only Snappy Bear, my wife, so of course shout outs to her as well. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into our draft analysis. Now, again, if you watched my SSBA draft analysis and anything that I talked about during that league, you'll know exactly where I was going with my first pick in this league. I had to go with one particular thing because, as you all know, Snappy Bear wanted me to pick a particular Pokemon to build around last season. I wanted to use that Mon, I really did, and I thought I would be able to grab it round 2, and I was wrong. So yeah, I paid the price for it. I've continued to pay the price since. So I had to pick that up as my round 1 pick this time around. Even if nobody else was going to draft it anyway, I had to take it. It's Ursaluna. Now, my wife would have settled for Blood Moon version, which is the new one that came out, but I was pick number 10, so that was really never going to happen. So we went with normal Moon version instead.
The Moon, the Bear.
This Mon hits incredibly hard and is also very, very bulky. With Guts, it not only can boost its attack to crazy levels, but also can deal great damage with its stab facades, and that can often 1 or 2 shot basically anything that doesn't resist it. It also boasts a massive 130 HP and 105 defense, so it can sponge hits on the physical side for days, and it still has an 80 base special defense, which isn't terrible either. The only problem really comes with its low speed, but this can be helped by a couple of things. Number 1, it has access to Trailblaze, which does give us not only grass type coverage, which we also have Seed Bomb for, but it also raises our speed by 1 stage, so that can be a great tool, and it also can work in Trick Room, and we may or may not have some options for that during this draft as well. As far as other moves go, I'm just going to list a few, but it gets a lot of really good coverage. Of course, Headlong Rush is going to be one of the biggest ones because that is a really hard hitting ground move. It's basically close combat but for ground types, and so it deals huge damage with its ground stab. Of course, it also gets great coverage moves such as Crunch, Close Combat, Stone Edge, Play Rough, Gunk Shot, Drain Punch, Seed Bomb, Shadow Claw, Elemental Punches, and even Brick Break that helps to get rid of screens. Overall, this is just a really fantastic Mon that is so nice as a physical attacker, and even as a bulky Mon, it just works in a lot of different ways. And Guts isn't even the only way that this has to be run. It also gets access to Bulletproof, and Bulletproof can be really, really helpful if you can catch your opponent off guard with certain moves. Bulletproof, of course, blocks any kind of like bomb or ball moves, and there's quite a list of those. And so if your opponent is not prepared for that and is going for something that it falls into that, and you're not running Guts that week, that can really, really neuter something, especially if it's like choice locked into it. It can cause a lot of really bad situations if you're not prepared for it. So definitely a really cool niche pick. I definitely will be bringing it at least once during the season. Don't know when yet, but we'll just have to see. So next up, of course, I'm looking for a partner for Ursaluna. And so what do I need for that? I need something that's fast, right? Because Ursaluna is pretty slow. I need something that can deal with some mons that it struggles with, right? So of course, fighting types are one of the biggest problems for Ursaluna. We really don't have a lot to deal with those. In OU, I typically have paired Ursaluna with Galarian Slowking, just because it gets a lot of the tools I need, right? It gets pivoting, it gets the psychic typing, even the poison typing's decent because we don't really have a great super effective move for fairies, even though Facade hits plenty hard enough most of the time. So I mean, it's got the tools, but at the same time, I don't want to run it because, one, it's also slow here, And 2, new toy syndrome kind of got the better of me. And so round 2, I took Munki Dory. Yes, I know, new toy syndrome, and it may not have been the smartest thing, but it's okay. It actually does complement Ursaluna pretty well, I think. With 106 speed and 130 special attack, it gives me some really cool speed to counteract Ursaluna's lack, and it's a great special attacker as well. Of course, psychic typing helping me out with the fighting types, poison typing helping me out with certain fairies. It also gets access to Focus Blast that would take out those steals that normally would want to switch into its dual stab. It also gets U-turn and Parting Shot, so 2 great pivoting options. It also gets Trick, Taunt. We may even have to run Clear Smog 1 week to try to stop setup. I haven't even mentioned its abilities yet. It gets Frisk as a hidden ability, which is one of the best abilities in draft. It just tells you what your opponent's item is. But more importantly though, it gets a signature ability, and that's Toxic Chain. Toxic Chain gives a 30% chance to badly poison the opponent anytime that it's hit with an attack. That's kind of huge. It definitely helps to wear down some of your bulkier mons that are out there. You know, something like a Blissey would love to switch in on something like this, except that then it gets poisoned, and so it can't stay in for long. It has to switch out, and then something else has to take that hit. You know, natural cure for that one, but something else has to come in and take a hit. Probably doesn't have natural cure to get rid of that, so definitely can be a huge problem, and can definitely wear things down to where they end up in range of Ursaluna for later in the game when we need to clean up a little bit. So next up, I wanted to kind of shore up that a little bit, kind of shore up a trio of things. I wanted to go ahead and pick up a good steel type. I wanted to pick up something that could definitely spread status again with Munki Dory, because I've got some strats for that as well. And I thought a really good partner for all of this would be Golden Go. Golden Go is just a fantastic mod. It's super annoying to face. I didn't want to face it personally, so I drafted it, right? If you can't beat them, draft them onto your team. Golden Go is fantastic because it has one of the best typings in the game with 3 immunities built in, which is great. And I mean, round 3 is kind of late for something like this to go, right? It gets a lot of really, really good tools. It's decently bulky with 87 HP, 95 defense, and 91 special defense. It also gets access to recover if we want to run something like that. And then of course, offensively, it has a 133 special attack, which is great. And paired up with its signature move, Make It Rain, yeah, this thing's kind of a monster. It's a 120 base power steel move that nukes anything that doesn't resist, and the only drawback is that it has a -1 special attack drop after you use it. But this of course can be negated with Nasty Plot, which is really, really good. It also gets moves like Shadow Ball, Power Gem, Psy Shock, Dazzling Gleam, Thunderbolt, Focus Blast, and Steel Beam, as well as screens if we ever wanted to do that as well. It gets the ability Good as Gold, which is really good. It means that you can't be hit by status moves. So this thing is the ultimate anti rapid spinner / defogger because it's immune to both. So yeah, really, really cool mon, really, really powerful. Definitely something that I want, just because if I'm going to set up some hazards, I really want them to stick around. And so if you didn't run boots to prep for it, I want it to really hurt. So definitely a really, really good pickup for us. Next up, I was looking for a dark type, and I had 3 options in mind. My first choice was Mandibuzz. Then I was looking at Hisuian Samurott, and then after that I was like, I don't know. All right, so I'm 9th in the draft, right? So I've got 3 people after me and then 3 back on the way up. So I'm like, you know, I think I can go ahead and plan on, I'm gonna get Mandibuzz here at this point, and it's gonna be just fine. And yeah, Mandibuzz and Hisuian Samurott both went on the way back up. Yeah, so out of the 3 picks, 2 of them were dark types that I was looking at, so that was unfortunate. So I went with Meowscarada. Meowscarada, of course, is one of the best mons in draft, in my opinion. Protean is a great ability. It also has really fantastic speed at base 123. It gets knockoff, so that can take out some really crucial utility from opponents. It also gets the signature move Flower Trick. It's a decently powerful grass move, but it always crits. So this means we don't care about screens, boosts, nothing else like that, right? It's great for bulky waters, things like want to set up, things like bulk up Palafin, right? This thing comes in, ignores your defense boosts, who cares, and can take you out no problem. So things like that are really, really valuable, and so I think that's really helpful. Definitely can help to break things that have set up the defensive side to try to counter things like Ursaluna, right? And so this can allow me to break that a little bit easier, which is really, really nice for sure. It also gives me another pivot in U-turn. It also gives me spikes. It also gives me toxic spikes. We also get priority sucker punch. There's a lot of really, really good stuff here, right? And this also does begin our Firewater Grass Core, which I was really wanting to do on this team. And I figured I probably should get started. So that is how Meow came to be. Next up, I wanted to go ahead and grab a good fairy, and Florges had already gotten taken. Florges was pretty cheap in this draft, I felt. And it went to Will, who is actually my week 1 opponent. I find that out now. And so I was really eyeing that. I really was wanting it because it was pretty cheap for how good Florges is. And so I ended up having to spend a few extra points on a fairy that's still really, really good. And that, of course, is going to be Sylveon. Now, I was between Sylveon and, of course, Tinkaton. They're both really good. But I think Sylveon's going to do me a little bit better. I was wanting a cleric for the team because I currently didn't have anything like that. And I didn't have anything like that back in SSBA either, and I think that really bit me. So I really wanted some kind of a cleric, a wish passer of some kind. So that's kind of why we took this. It's super bulky on the special side and can hit pretty hard with its hyper voices with Pixelate boost, which is really, really great. Again, it's a great wish passer. It also gets things like Yawn. It can pivot with Baton Pass. It's got a lot of really good tools. It did lose access, unfortunately, to Mystical Fire, and so its ability to hit steals has been nerfed significantly. But besides that, it's typically pretty good, and there actually are a couple of techs that we can use in order to hit steals, but I'm not going to talk about those just yet. Next up, I wanted to go ahead and take my first Terra Captain. A lot of Terra Captains were starting to go, and I had been eyeing this particular Terra Captain from the beginning, and I figured if I don't take it now, it might get taken later on in the draft, or possibly even before it gets to me again. And I picked up Vikavolt. Again, this is new old toy syndrome here, but Vikavolt is really good as a Terra Captain. It has a base 145 special attack. That is insane. That's better than some legendaries. I mean, it's nuts. Combined with the ability to Terrastalize, this thing punches huge holes in teams. So while the bug typing isn't the best, we can Terra Electric, and that drops all weaknesses thanks to the Levitate ability, which is great. And of course, it's even harder with T-Bolts, Thunders, Discharges, Volt Switches, whatever we want to do. I also chose Ice so that we can have the Bolt Beam combination, which, if you don't know what Bolt Beam is, it's the combination of Ice Beam plus T-Bolt. Basically, that combination of typings hits basically everything in the format for at least neutral. There are a couple exceptions as they add new mons here and there, but for the most part, you can hit almost everything out there for at minimum neutral, which is really, really huge, right? So really great for a Terra Captain. And I also added Ground. I'm not sure how much I'm going to bring Ground, but it's definitely a nice little niche pick, and can help me to have a more powerful ground move. The best thing we have right now is Mud Shot, which is pretty trash. So definitely if I'm going up against like a tough fire type that I want to take out with this, that might be a good answer, and so we'll at least consider that. This mon is quite slow once again, but it does get access to agility and Sticky Web, and both of those are great options here. Sticky Web, of course, lowering anything that touches the ground speed by one stage, and of course agility doubling our speed. And we actually hit a very crucial breakpoint with the agility boost on this Vikavolt if we're max speed, and it's kind of amazing. I don't want to talk about it too much, but yeah, it's really, really nice actually. So I'm pretty pumped about using this, and I think it's going to give us a lot of really good value here. Charge Beam, of course, can raise that special attack even higher. We get the pivot out with Volt Switch, and we also get great coverage moves such as Bug Buzz, Energy Ball, flash cannon, or we could go with discharge if we wanted to have the paralysis chance. So at this point in my draft, I took a bit of a turn. At this point, I drafted a bunch of different things than what you're about to see on the slides. And I ended up taking some stuff that I switched around in grace period. I actually ended up burning one of my regular season transactions in order to make all of this happen. And so these next 2 picks and then the 2 after that actually all came in grace period, and only the third to next mon, I guess, was originally part of my draft. So a little bit strange in how this worked out, but I really think that it ended up making my draft a lot more balanced in the end. So just one thing to keep in mind, but I wanted to stay in order of these slides here. Speaking of which, these slides were made by CB Marcus. Huge shout out. They were really, really awesome. They were shown off at first last week during the draft reveal stream, when they did a big draft analysis with D-Ray, Kurt, and Flagon. That'll of course be down in the description below. And again, I will have all of the coaches links down in the description below as well. Make sure to check them out. Check out the Discord as well. All of the things, all of that will be in the description. Make sure to check all of that out. And yeah, it's going to be a really good time. But so what did I do right now? What was I lacking, right? As I looked through my team, and I originally had Tatsugiri, which was only 3 points in this format, which I thought was kind of a steal, but it just wasn't quite cutting it for what I needed in a dragon. And there were a couple of other things that I was missing as well. And so I wanted a really strong dragon. So I gave up several mons in order to go back and pick up the undrafted Dragonite. I don't know how Dragonite didn't get drafted. That beats me, because Dragonite's insane, right? It's such a good mon, and it gets amazing things, right? So we get things like Dragon Dance. We can of course boost our attack and speed, and of course it gets things like Dragon Claw and Earthquake. Both of those really solid options for just for hitting basically everything. We get priority with Extreme Speed and Aqua Jet. We also get things like Focus Blast, Hurricane, Stone Edge, Fire Blast, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump. I mean, the list goes on. It can be physical or special. Physical's a little bit better, but special's not terrible, so it can definitely work. It's got one of the most powerful abilities in the game, which is multi-scale. That means you take half damage from any attack that hits you while you're at max HP, and of course it gets Roost as well, so that it can heal itself back up. Really great mon, both offensively and defensively. Dragon Flying is a pretty decent typing. Of course, the 4x weakness to ice is a little rough, but yeah, this was a really good mon that I was shocked did not get picked up. So definitely something that is going to help our team out massively as we go forward. Really glad I was able to pick that up. So the next mon, again, not part of the regular draft. I originally had Vaporeon in this slot, and Vaporeon is really good, right? I needed a bulky water because otherwise I could just kind of get stomped by certain things. And so Vaporeon really fit the bill here pretty nicely, right? The problem is Vaporeon is really expensive, and I just really didn't have the ability to pay all of the points that I wanted to in order to have that. So I gave that up, and that really was what helped me to afford the Dragonite. But so I went looking for another bulky water, and I found that in a recently buffed Pokemon, and that is regular Samurott. Now, regular Samurott is obviously not quite as good as its new Hisuian counterpart, but it does have some pretty cool stuff, and it was actually recently buffed with the DLC as well, which is really great. So Samurott is, number one, a decently bulky water type. Its coverage is a little lacking in what it gets, but it did get access to things like the flip turn and things like the vacuum wave as well. Vacuum wave is a move that kind of got a much wider distribution here in the DLC than what it's ever had before. and this was something that got it. So I've got another form of priority, which is pretty nice. I've got some momentum with that. I've got a bulky water type. It comes with some pretty decent stuff, like assault vest is pretty good, leftovers is pretty good, and then of course it gets things like hydro pump, your standard water type stuff. It's nothing crazy, I don't think, but the momentum is nice, and its ability to tank shouldn't be underestimated. I really think that this is a pretty decent pick. It was only like 3 points, I believe. So super cheap for what it was, but I think it's got some really nice potential as a bulky water. And so I'm interested to see just how well this thing does. So the last mon that was actually part of our normal draft here, I'm looking through this whole squad, and what am I missing? I don't have any kind of hazard removal, which is really bad. I had that problem last season as well. All I had was iron treads, and so it was often having to run rapid spin on weeks that it didn't want to, and so that was a bit of a problem, right? So I wanted to do that a little bit better. I ended up kind of in the same boat this season, but I do think I have a better grasp on where everything falls this time around. I don't think that this is as good of a rapid spinner as last time, because obviously treads went like round 2 or 3, but we went with Bramblegast. Bramblegast is a really cool mon, right? It is, of course, Ghost Grass, which is Snappy Bear, my wife's favorite typing of all time. She loves Trevenant. She loves the new Sinistcha, all that stuff. She loves that typing, as well as Decidueye. Can't forget that. That's one of her favorite starters. And this mon had a really good run in the VGC World Championships this past year as well. And then it got buffed in the new DLC, which is great. That's why I was really looking at it, right? So it was okay before, but now it gets access to the move Poltergeist. And so the biggest issue that this thing had before was that it didn't have any good physical ghost moves. Every ghost move was going to be Phantom Force, which has a charge period, which is not great, or you had to Terra in order to run Terra Blast. And both of those options kind of suck, because I don't necessarily want to use my Terra to do that. Well, Poltergeist gives us a more powerful ghost move, and we don't even have to worry about terastallizing to do it, which is fantastic. The opponent just has to be holding an item. So there is counterplay to this move. The opponent just has to not have an item. But I mean, that's pretty good counterplay, right? Because unless you're something like an Unburdened Sneasler, then you're gonna probably want an item unless it was knocked off earlier. So I'm gonna have to keep track of when I knock things off and not try to poltergeist those things, and just keep that in mind. And so this thing gets really good bulky things as well. It's got decent attack and speed, but also decent bulk as well. It gets strength sap, leech seed, pain split, all on the bulky side. I could have made this a Terra Captain, and I'm not against possibly changing this to be a Terra Captain later in the season. We'll just have to see how some of my other Terra stuff turns out once we get to that. Plus, this thing also gets an absolutely busted ability called Wind Rider. Wind Rider makes you immune to wind moves, and there are quite a few of those. Things like Hurricane and Heat Wave come to mind. The exclusive moves of the Genies, and plus a bunch of others. And so those are pretty much all super effective on this. It makes you immune to them, and you also get an attack boost, which is huge. You also could set up your own Tailwind and go that way. So Shiftry just got access to this as well, and Shiftry is thriving with Wind Rider, but this can definitely be activated and come in handy for sure. And so I think that this is going to be a really interesting mon for sure, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. 90 base speed is not the worst. Its attack isn't the worst. Its defenses aren't the worst. It's a pretty good mon. I think it's better with Terra, and so we'll just have to see once we get to midway through the season if we needed to switch something up. But for now, I'm gonna leave it as not one of my Terra mons. So I had 2 picks left, right, and I had like 6 or 7 points left. I didn't have a whole lot, and you'll notice I don't have a fire type. So I was like, well, dang, I really wanted Hisuian Typhlosion. I really wanted that. Couldn't get it. Somebody else had already taken it because it works really well. Infernal Parade works really well with Toxic Chain, so I was kind of gunning for that, but I ran out of time and points, so that didn't work out. So for fire type, really the only one that made any kind of sense. Tauros Blaze was a little too expensive, unfortunately. I originally had Monferno on here as a Terra Captain, which would have been so fun. I love that whole line. We ended up going with Flareon. This obviously was my second evolution, and actually I had Vaporeon prior to making the big switch, so I went through 3 different evolutions during the course of all of this, which is really funny. But this mon with Terra is actually pretty interesting. It gets guts similar to Ursaluna, but it does things a little bit differently because it has very limited coverage, but it has more speed, and its attack stats is still very respectable, and it also has a very respectable special defense too, so it doesn't necessarily have to run guts. It can run flash fire, and that's not a bad ability either. So definitely some options there. For terastallization types here, I picked up the fire type, of course, because I had to. I picked up normal type and fighting as well. The normal typing is huge because number 1, of course, facade, so that makes us hit even harder. Number 2, we get priority, which is something that normal Ursaluna does not get access to. So that's huge too. So big quick attacks coming out can definitely be huge, right? The third and most important one to me is that we have always had to run Toxic Orb on Flareon because it would be immune if you were to run a Flame Orb. However, with Terra Normal, we can get around that and actually burn ourselves so we're not taking anywhere near as much of that residual damage every turn. So I think that's a huge win for Flareon, and I think that this mon actually can be decent. And again, it's a little bit faster than Ursaluna, and it gets Trailblaze, so it can be boosted speed as well. It gets Will-O-Wisp as well for those hard-hitting physical attackers. It gets Body Slam for possible status. So it's got some nice tools, and I think this mon has some potential. I think it has potential as a really cool low-tier Terra Captain. So definitely something to watch out for as well. And then finally, I had like 2 or 3 points left. I had just enough to make whatever it is that I picked into a Terra Captain, and I picked up something that I desperately needed, and that's something fast. Electrode was sitting there at 2 points, and I figured for 2 points this mon is actually pretty good, right? Its defenses aren't the best, its offenses are okay, its speed is insane, right? And so if you're not careful and you let your team get taken down a little bit, this thing will just sweep because it's so fast, right? 150 base speed is nutty, and you're not going to see a whole lot that's faster than this outside of your Regielekis right now, right? Very little is going to outspeed this without a scarf, and so it forces speed and prep, which is huge because otherwise you're just going to get outrun and possibly swept once you've been worn down. Especially because this thing can run Terra Electric, which is normal, Terra Ice, again, there's that Bolt Beam, and then I went with Terra Grass. I don't know how I feel about it. I was between Grass and Fairy. I think Fairy might be a little bit better, but this does give me the other Electrode at home. This gives me Electrode Hisui at home, so definitely could be something useful. It gives me something else for ground types that might not be so weak to the ice. But Fairy might end up being better, and so I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens. I might end up using a transaction to change that to Fairy. We'll just have to see. But either way, it's really, really cool. Of course, it gets 3 really good abilities as well. It gets Soundproof, which especially against a mon like Komo-O and certain other really big mons, like things that use Parting Shot, other types of sound moves, it's completely immune, which is really good. Can definitely stop some things in their tracks. Static can paralyze things on contact. That's huge. You catch a U-turn, get paralyzed on the way out for your troubles. That's really good. And then Aftermath can also be really interesting because if you come in and deal a bunch of damage to Electrode, that's great, but then you take a bunch of recoil and possibly lose a mon that you shouldn't have lost. That can be huge too. So definitely a lot of really, really cool options that you can run on this, and it's hard to guess which one you're going to want to run. And while it does lack in its coverage, it makes up for it, in my opinion, in its utility. Things like Eerie Impulse, Screech, Mirror Coat, Charge Beam, Volt Switch, Taunt, and even Screens. So a lot to love with that Pokemon there. So that is our draft for this season. I hope that you guys are looking forward to an amazing season. I know that I am. Our first week's battle is going to go up a week from tomorrow, I believe. So we are really looking forward to getting this going. You've got 9 weeks of regular season and then hopefully a few weeks playoffs as well. So I am looking forward to that so much. Next week, I'm also getting back into my Dungeons and Dragons content that I have been putting off for so long. I'm ready to make some content again. The baby has made it a little difficult to create content, but you know what? We're getting back into it and I am super pumped. Make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe so you don't miss any of these battles. Check out all of the links in the description for all the coaches. Check out the Discord, all of that good stuff. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.